I patented healing collar packaging, where the friction fit healing collar that came with the implant, used it as an insertion tool, and then you could attach different screws so that the healing collar became the transmucosal part of the abutment. And guess what? In 2017, Nobel reintroduced what they call the on-one concept, which is a healing collar that takes a variety of abutments on the top. They sell this healing collar separately, whereas mine was provided friction fit with the implant. The on-one concept bolts a healing collar into the implant, and then a fixation screw passes through the abutment, locking into the top of the screw that held the healing collar in. This is less stable than having one screw pass through all three components. The on-one healing collar fits into the conical connection of the implant, but the top of the healing collar provides a butt joint connection for the abutment attachment, which also could compromise stability. Replant with surgical and prosthetic compatibility with Nobel Replace was followed by the Replus and Reactive. First one sort of cloned the Replace, added micro threads and put a cutting groove in it. And then these were tapered like the Screw-Vent implant, and this one had a little more aggressive threads. So I received a patent on the only way around the Nobel Replace patent, and that allowed us to take a big bite out of their business. And we compared it to the Nobel Active. It had a number of features that I preferred over the Nobel Active, which has a back taper gap at the top. This seals the top, micro threads instead of just micro grooves, a self-tapping cutting groove that goes up to the straight part of the implant, and cuts when you go clockwise. This cutting groove only cuts when you go counterclockwise. It's to help you unscrew the implant, because this 9-degree taper into the bone, and you need a way to get it out to make the hole bigger. Instead, just create the right size hole and screw in a self-tapping implant. So a round end instead of a sharp end, which can tear a sinus membrane or change the track as you're screwing the implant in. This is showing the 78-degree bevel of the Nobel Active and the Interactive, the 45-degree bevel of the Legacy Screw-Vent BioHorizons. And I see many advantages to that. One thing, when you have a long bevel, the walls get thinner. You may require, you push the hex farther into the implant, so you can't make short implants, and you may require an X-ray to confirm whether the abutment's fully seated. So I don't think anybody is yet improved. There's many connections that will work, but I don't think anybody's yet improved on what the Screw-Vent in 1986 introduced. And this is just showing different thread patterns, a variety of implants, Nobel Replace. It would have been very easy for them to put a cutting groove in this implant after they bought this company from Stereos in the late 1990s. Here's the Nobel compatible implant we developed called the Replant, micro threads and a cutting groove. Here's the Nobel Active with its extreme taper, sharp cutting edge, back tapered top. Here's the Legacy 3 and the Interactive with threads and grooves. Question: what is an effective self-tapping design on a tapered implant? A self-tapping implant has a relief and groove that cuts threads in a clockwise rotation. Shown here is a bone tap with a relief moving ahead of the cutting edge. That feature is also on the Legacy 2 and 4 implants shown here, but the Nobel Active has its relief area trailing the cutting edge, so it's only effective for unscrewing the implant. The BLX straight implants shown here have grooves cut through the threads without any relief areas. Here's a marketing piece from Zimmer. They compared the initial torque on a Screw-Vent Nobel Active, Replace, and Straumann's implant. The screw-vent, tapered screw-vent generated 100% more primary stability than Straumann's, and I think about 29% more than the Nobel Active, which has much deeper threads. And the reason is when you have deeper threads, you have to make them wider apart, and then there's more room for the bone to push in. As you're tightening it down, all you're doing is allowing the bone to squeeze into those spaces. Whereas here, if you put that tapered implant into an undersized socket, it's pushing out on the bone. I'm no fan of osteodensification or whatever that is. Running burrs backwards could generate more heat. You get all the osteodensification you want by putting a tapered implant into an undersized socket, and I got the front tooth to prove it. Okay, so let's talk about the question of all on 4, 3, or 2, angle or straight implants. Concept to angle distal implants to reduce the length of the cantilever extension. So this is Nobel's all on 4, and they're angling these implants. They pay $250, $300 for an angled abutment and angling them in the lower. This was a case that they posted, and if I take a close look at that implant, I think the bar is holding the implant in.
Now they've launched Trefoil, so they have basically stepped on their own message. They're now saying,
well, really, you only need 3 straight implants. You don't need what we've been telling you for the last 10 years that you need 4 with angled distal abutments. Just 3 of them, and we'll sell you a bar, prefabricated bar. There's a school of thought in Europe where they're putting in just 2 implants.
This was posted on the web. A dentist put in 3 implants, but only loaded the center one. I don't know when or if he's going to load the others. This zygomatic implant case is done by Ramsey Amin.
Beautiful case. It is a fabulous surgeon placing these long implants. But if you can cantilever off of a little bit of bone engagement here, why do you need to angle the implants? Just put 5 of them straight up and down. I just graphically did that. So that's my message, is 4 or 5 implants straight up and down in the symphysis is the way to go. Forget about these angled implants.
This is a case that was posted on Nobel's website. Clinical case, full arch maxillary prosthesis using all on 4, showing what they claim is the optimum implant distribution.
Again, graphically, I just showed you could put 6 straight implants in there. You can look at all this bone behind that distal implant. So all you're thinking about is angled implants. You're making your life more difficult. Question, micro threads, micro grooves, or both? One thing, back taper, back taper coronal region, you want a slight taper or extreme taper. Implant directs are 2 degrees, the Nobel Active is 9, and try and put that into dense bone, it gets stuck, which is why they put the cutting groove in reverse. And here's a Nobel Active with the back taper. My suggestion would be to have an implant that seals the crest. So here's the micro threads, an SEM of the blasted surface and the HA. They look almost the same. If you're going to do a sinus elevation and break through the floor of the sinus, wouldn't you want to have micro threads or some threads where the bone remains just below the sinus? Question, what is better, round or sharp apex? Wouldn't you prefer having a round apex in the sinus than a sharp apex? Different implant surfaces. Machined is proven to be too smooth. I believe the acid etching from the 3 eyes osteotype is also too smooth. All these other blasted ones, whether it be Straumann or Zimmer or any of the others, work just fine. HA coating works fine. And here's TiUnite. I'm not sure about TiUnite. It's porous. TPS is off the market. That was a porous surface. But in all fairness, Nobel posts on its website, clinical performance of dental implants with moderately rough TiUnite surface, a meta-analysis of prospective clinical studies. That means somebody that looked up the results of 106 studies, 106, and showed only 5% of the patients had peri-implantitis. So it doesn't sound too bad. But this is written by Albrektsson, who is a paid opinion leader for Nobel. And this I like to point out. In 1982, Brånemark and Albrektsson wrote an article showing the SEM of this fibroblast in soft tissue. A year later, the two of them wrote an article and called that an osteoblast from an upper dental implant. Nobel then colorized it and used it as its logo, and it's on the cover of Brånemark's textbook. So the question is, what can you believe from what you read? Here is an email that I got by mistake. It was sent by a periodontist in Toronto to some Nobel sales representatives, and for some reason he put me on it, and he said at least 25% are showing unacceptable high degree of early bone loss. And here's the pictures from that. So where does the truth lie? I think you want to have a medium rough surface. I think you want to carry it to the top. If you're really porous bone, you want to use something that'll give you a boost, HA coating.
About a decade ago, Nobel's one-piece Nobel Direct implant was sold with a porous TiUnite surface extending up the neck into the soft tissue area. Nobel claimed this promoted, quote, soft tissue integration, end of quote. That implant was eventually taken off the market after a class action lawsuit was filed by a dentist who had multiple failures. Apparently, Nobel's answer now is to create a smooth surface on the top few millimeters of the implant by anodizing, which could be smoother than machine surface. The grooves at the top of the Nobel Active are there because that area is intended to be, and hopefully remain, subcrustal. Anodizing the neck makes it smoother than just leaving it as a machine surface and will encourage bone recession. The only rationale to color the neck gold would be if resorption took place, exposing it to the soft tissue, and then only in the aesthetic zone. From the references to mucointegration, it sounds like Nobel anticipates bone loss, with this implant resulting in the gold neck being exposed to the soft tissue. Certainly there is no rationale for a gold-colored neck in the posterior, and especially not on all-on-4 cases as shown here.
Question, straight or tapered drills for tapered implants? Tapered drills need to be length and depth specific, adding significantly to the number of drills. So if you want to have a tapered drill, you got to have one for each length of implant, each diameter of implant. Whereas if you use straight step drills, you can do all lengths of implants with just the one drill. And then if the bone is very dense, you use a crustal bone drill. So here's the crustal bone drills. In type 1 bone, if you need to open up the cortical bone, Implant Direct did not make bone taps. We used a hard, dense bone surgical protocol, open the hole up almost to the size of the implants at just the tips of the threads, and go in and open up the crest even further. So we avoid all those surgical instruments. Question, what is the best material for dental implants? Strong yet flexible. Pure titanium, grade 4 Nobel. And the reason I use that is that TiUnite will not form on an alloy. Zirconia alloy by Straumann, or 6-4 alloy by all the other companies. And here's a Nobel implant, and they have a warning, do not exceed 45 Newton centimeters on placing the implant, because you can crack the implant and have to cut it out. So you want to choose the material that is the strongest. Zirconia alloy is strong, but it's also brittle, as you'd imagine from zirconia. Question, use of aftermarket abutments with Nobel and Straumann implants. Both Straumann and Nobel advise against this to promote sale of their more expensive abutments. So they show a bird nestled in a exhaust pipe and say just because it fits, it doesn't mean it works. And then they show this and they suggest mismatched components can lead to uncontrolled peak forces, which can cause implant failure. Using pure titanium material can also lead to fractures, which is the more likely reason why that implant fractured. And isn't it strange that Straumann acquired Medidenka and now selling competitors' compatible abutments, and Nobel now sells CAD-milled abutments for competitors' implants. So it's okay for them to sell abutments for the competitors' implants, but don't you dare use a competitor's abutment with our implant.